What's up, people? Another Legends update. We're getting fairly deep into this thing now. And this is the answer to the hint. It is Danny Manning. A bunch of people still got it right. I'm a crank it up. I'm gonna crank up the difficulty on this hint. It's gonna be hard this next time. These other ones I've been playing with y'all. It's gonna get hard next time. This is, like I said, Danny Manning, 6'10", 230-pound, power forward. Played for a lot of teams, but I got him here with the Clippers. He's regarded as one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. Won a national championship in 1988 with Kansas. Larry Brown was a coach. Larry Brown also ended up coaching him with the Clippers. This year is modeled after the 92-93 season, 22.8 points a game, only 6.6 rebounds, so we're going to fill it in the attributes for that because he's a power forward. 2.6 assists, 1.3 blocks, 51% from the field. So that's what we went with Mr. Manning. He also had some knee problems. This actually, the year that I took, I believe, is he played a lot of the year with a huge knee brace on. So we had to. I don't usually do too much with the durability unless the year that I'm taking, he was actually injured in that year. So that year he didn't play. He played about 79 games or 77 games, but because visually he had the big knee brace on, I had to still, kind of deal with that a little bit. So not crazy athlete at all. So just got the basic slams for the most part. So that's that. So now let's take a look at Mr. Manning's attributes and badges. So he got an 82 overall, which according to 2K is basically the position average. But I continue to tell you guys, as I continue to hear, the people talk about the ratings and all that, you have to really look at the individual statistics because there are certain ratings that are weighted very heavily according to the position. And actually, we messed up here, so I don't know what happened with this size. Wait, I thought I changed this. I didn't actually get a chance to change the size. It actually doesn't have anything to do with the ratings, only the position does. I just noticed that the size didn't come in right, so we got to make sure that is right. So that's what that's supposed to be. So he was a humongous man for a minute there. Had to get him right. So anyway, but yeah, 26 years old from Kansas. But some of these statistics are weighted very heavily for, you know what I just noticed though? When I changed his position, I believe his overall went down a point. Ha! Isn't that something? That is interesting. Because I believe it said 82 before that, right? So yeah, so you see, I find out things live while I'm actually doing this. But as I was mentioning, some of the ratings are very much weighted. So if a guy doesn't get a really high rating in a certain area, then his overall is just not going to get high, not going to be high. But in playing and testing the players, after I make each one, I'm noticing that they're playing realistic, and ultimately I think that's more important than the overall. So if you do get this roster, and you, like I said, you do a fantasy draft, you're going to have to lean on knowing something about some of these players. Because if you're trying to put together a team that's going to be good and it's going to win, you want to have a balanced squad, then you're going to have to know a little bit about the players so that you'll know who you need to have. So that's Danny Manning. I think I did a fairly decent job with him. So, yeah, let's bounce out to the next player. Almost fell in real life. Almost just fell down. But I'm all right. Everybody relax. This is Bernard King. New York Knicks legend. But also one of those guys that people always have to say, what if? I took actually the 84-85 season. He led the league in scoring, 32.9 points a game, 53% from the field. He was 28 years old. 6'7", 205 pounds, right? The thing about Bernard King was injuries. That's the thing. Even this particular season here, he actually only played 55 games. So that's the thing everybody always wonders about. Well, what would have happened if Bernard King hadn't got injured? I mean, it was no question he was one of the best scorers of his era. If you look at the 80s, if you talk about like the top 5 scorers of the decade, you'd have to put him in that category. Now, he wasn't a great defender, wasn't an extraordinary rebounder, even considering he was just a small forward. And he wasn't even that explosive of an athlete, even though he had sneaky athleticism and sneaky hops. As you'll see, some of the highlights, you'll see him explode above somebody, even though he normally wasn't a finisher above the rim like that. But just here and there, he'd explode. He also had very long arms. So, very, very skilled offensive player. But let's say marginal or average in the other areas. So, with that, let's take a look at his badges. You see the rating, and I know people in New York just dropped their mobile device or they just dropped their mouse. 79. But now you see there's a ton of badges here. It's a good number of badges. You got 21 badges. And almost half of them are gold. So we're giving him the love for sure as an offensive player. But the thing about it is when we go to defense, I'm not saying he's bad, but you got to take a look at a little bit of defense. The other thing, humongous thing, he's a small forward, right? But the year that I took his statistics from as a three-point shooter, he only made 10% of his threes. Now, he didn't take a lot. Didn't take a lot of them. He only made 10% of them. So I tried to say, okay, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's look and see a little bit later in his career, even though he was injured a lot, even when he went to the Washington Bullets. See, did he shoot the three? And if he shot it, how well did he shoot it? Well, he never had a year where he shot the three better than 29%. So I couldn't bring the three up much higher than this, and I was probably generous with that. So because he's a small forward, and his three-point rating isn't high, like I did a test here. I jacked up the shooting three and the moving shot three rating up to like 85 and 80. And his rating went up to like an 82 or an 83. So that's a humongous rating for small forwards. So I'm learning, as I'm doing this, which ratings give the guys the highest, what affects their overall the most. So here's the thing, though. Because everybody trips on overall ratings, right? And they're like, oh, Kobe's only an 85, or Kobe's only 87, or this guy's only a this guy's only a that. Well, do I give them credit in areas where they don't deserve it or they didn't earn it based off of the way they played that season, just so visually they'll have a better overall? Or do I try to just stick to my formula and say, I believe the guys are going to play realistic if I stick to this formula? I think I should do the latter, and that's what I've been doing. So that's why you might see some guys that don't have overall as high as you might expect. So that I think I'm going to probably limit how many more times I explain, where I'm coming from with that. So, but that is Bernard King. Let's look at the next guy. Last but not least, Denver Nuggets great Kiki Vandeweghe, 6'8", 220 pounds, listed as a small forward, power forward. Modeled after the 83-84 season, 29.4 points a game, 4.8 rebounds, 56% from the field, 25 years old at the time. Vandeweghe was a pure scorer, pure shooter more so, but you would have to say more than just a pure shooter. He could score. There's a difference between a shooter and a scorer. A shooter is a guy like Kyle Korver who is, he gets a clean look and he hits a high percentage of his outside shots, or it's just shots from the, outside of the paint. A scorer can put the ball in the basket in a variety of ways. They get to the basket. They get to the free throw line, especially. And so their offensive game goes beyond, or their scoring game goes beyond just being a good pure shooter. So a pure scorer would be a guy like Kobe Bryant. A shooter is Kyle Korver, if you kind of get the gist there. So I think Vandeweghe was a little bit in between. I think if he played today, he'd be a pure shooter. not so much a pure scorer, because I don't think he'd be quite athletic enough to be a scorer. But still able to put the ball in the basket a lot that year, especially. So I balanced out a little bit of the athleticism thing, because Vandeweghe was never a great athlete, and never a good defender, which pretty much nobody for Denver around that time was very much of a defender, except for maybe they had a center back in the day who, if you look at the record books or whatever, and you look at some of the like top shot blockers in the 80s, a guy named Wayne Cooper was there a lot. So from a defensive standpoint, that might have been just about it for them. But, and there's also a guard that you see a lot in terms of steals. Bill Hanslick and then T.R. Dunn, both of those guys were really good, had reputations of really good on-ball defenders. So that's that. So let's take a look at Vandeweghe's attributes and badges. As I mentioned, this is, like I said, the 83-84 season. He only got a 78 overall. And that stuff is going to be based purely on, if you look, once you just pay attention to the ratings, it's going to be based on layups. I mean, not layups. I was just reading the layups. On athleticism and defense. So that's what kept him down, because obviously the shooting numbers are high. But the things that have to do with athleticism, defense, rebounding is low. An average rebounder. I suppose maybe actually I should bump up his offensive rebound, defensive rebounds a little bit more than that, because that's a lot below the position average. But so we'll bump that up a little bit. I don't think it's going to have that big of an effect, because the small forward position doesn't put a lot of weight on the rebounding numbers and for the overall. So, but here are the badges. Got 13 of them. Pretty much all of them are about shooting. And let's see, we're going to do a little quick test here with the offensive and defensive rebounding ratings. Should be about here. About there, because he averaged more. His defensive rebounding was usually the majority of the person's rebounding statistics, but clearly a better defensive rebounder than offensive rebounder. So, as you can see, took it up about 15, barely affected his overall, got him to a 79, which is better still, and I think that's more accurate. So, see, we're not rigid. We'll change it. So there is Kiki Vandeweghe. Just a side note, I had Spencer Haywood playing with the Rockets. Matter of fact, it should have been with the Nuggets on my little preview. Not that it's going to matter if you do a fantasy draft, but had him with the Rockets, but he was playing for the Denver Rockets, but that team turned into the Denver Nuggets, so that was a mistake. So we fixed that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at some highlights, y'all. Peace. Almost forgot. I told you about the hint. I got to give you that hint. Now, this guy that's going to be in the next episode is this. He was a first-round draft pick of the Chicago Bulls. He has won an NBA championship. He has been an All-Star, All-NBA, and a Defensive Player of the Year. But he didn't win any of those honors with the Bulls. Who is it? Now, let's take a look at some highlights. I appreciate y'all watching. Peace.
From three-point range here in the first quarter. Here's Manning, and he uses the glass on the layup.
Well, they're really doing a nice job of stringing together solid possessions.
Any lulls going forward.
Now here's King. Goes up and lays it nice and easy.
Well, they finally connect with their fourth shot of the game.
King, right side. That's good, and it's Jackson with the assist that time. King's got his second bucket.
He can flat out put the ball in the basket. You got to give him a lot of credit, though. He does change his game quite a bit depending on if he's coming off the bench or
Short time, it really adds a lot of utility to this team.
Now here's King. He's got 6. And it's good. Fought through contact. Hits the shot. He'll go to the free throw line.
he's having quite the quarter here, guys. I mean, shooting the ball extremely well.
Well, Crawford described it perfectly, Clark, when he said as a 6th man, you have to come in and force yourself into the game. Paul passes to Manning. They need this. Kicks it out to Paul. Goes up again, and the layup is up and in.
Yeah, off to a rough start. They just wore them down.
What Steve just talked about regarding how much they spread their scoring around was probably the most striking thing about that big win.
And the fact that they did have such a huge lead allowed them to even use their bench a little more than normal, and that was something that served them well.
Blake Griffin, he's checked in.
Make free throws.
Yeah, and that's frustrating to watch, especially on the road where your opportunities at the line.
You go out on the road, you can't rely on your starters night in and night out. The reserves have to contribute and help them out.
I think we definitely saw that, Steve, throughout the game. They were really tight.
Is off.
That's an easy shot there. That's a shot that he should make more often than not.
Wasted no time on that one. And it's 9 points for the Magicians.
But you know, they've got a nice lead. Don't take any chances. The simple one-hander is just fine.
Fades back, and the shot counts. He's fouled, and it's a chance for a 3-point play.
Man, he has been their unquestioned leader offensively this quarter.
And a chance to catch up on some numbers here. The scoring breakdown for Milwaukee.
Well, I like the fact they've already been getting the